Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Major League Soccer podcast, MLSTalks. I'm your host, Tom Scholes, and I'll be discussing the major talking points from the world of Major League Soccer and giving my opinions on the games that have just been in the past weekend and the biggest news around the league so far. And of course, when you're talking about the biggest news around the league so far, there is only one place to start today on Tuesday, the 7th of May. The time is currently, let me just check, 3:35pm British summertime. And all the way here in Milton Keynes, England, there has been news about a Mexican going to Portland in the United States. That's how big the game can be, and this is just how diverse it can be, and I hope everybody just embraces that at some point. But the big news is that Argentinian forward, 24-year-old Brian Fernandez, has finally joined the Portland Timbers, who is the leading goal scorer for Liga MX's side, Necaxa. I've probably got that completely wrong, but they're a Mexican side in Liga MX, and he's apparently one of the biggest goal scorers in the league, and it is a record-breaking fee for the Portland Timbers. I will hold my hands up and just admit off the bat, when I heard this signing and when I heard the news about Fernandez joining the Timbers, I didn't know much about him. I didn't know much about his background, his style of play, his ability, or his record this season, but just looking at him now, I've just seen some clips online of him, some highlights of his time in Mexico, and he looks very clinical. He isn't an Almiron kind of player. Of course, this guy is more of a goal scorer, and you can see this when you watch him play, that he knows where the back of the net is. He gets the ball, and his first thought on his mind is to score, is to shoot. Not necessarily shoot on sight like some players, but he has that natural instinct of getting the ball, either turning or running at the defence and shooting with a powerful shot. And there's a particular goal he scored against Tijuana, I think it was, where he miscontrolled the ball initially from the pass, but he regained the ball, he composed himself, he took a look up, he was on the right-hand side, the right-hand touchline. He beat one player, he took it past another, and he took it past another, and he just fired the shot into the goalkeeper. It was too hard, too quick, too hard for the goalkeeper to handle, and it went in through the near post. And I'm a big advocate of, if the goalkeeper gets a touch onto the ball, especially at this kind of level, they should be doing much to stop it. But on one hand, you can look at it that way. On the other, you can acknowledge the fact that Fernandez has got one hell of a shot behind him, and he seems to be the goal scorer that the Timbers, they'll get a lot out of him, and he'll be the goal scorer that they need and they want, and he'll link up well with the other Argentinians in the team. But he's Portland Timbers' third and final designated player, and it's changed from Lucas Milano is now on target allocation money, and he's no longer a designated player alongside Diego Valeri, but he's now left that space for Fernandez to come in. And then the reports coming from, I'm particularly reading the Portland Mercury report on this, is that the rumour seems to be that when Milano joined from Argentina a few years ago for $5 million, which was then a club record, the rumour seems to be that Fernandez has doubled that to $10 million, and he is now the Timbers' record fee. Now, there is kind of an undisclosed nature about Fernandez' fee. Then there is no real nailed-on number for it. Some people are saying it's $13 million. Some people are saying it's, like the Portland Mercury, are saying it's $10 million. Either way, what we do know is that it will be the Timbers' club record signing for it, and it is double figures in dollars anyway. And it's just excellent to see that the Timbers have finally got their striker, and it is a player that I think will do well for them. And I'm just looking at his stats here from the same article with the Portland Mercury. And in his first and only season in Liga MX, he scored 16 goals in 30 appearances, and he ended up second in the Golden Boot for the league. Now, when you're only in one season in the league, and in your season you are second top goal scorer, and then when you left Chilean football the season prior with 11 goals in 12 appearances, he's looking, to me, and my limited knowledge of him, is that he's just a pure goal scorer. That is all you can boil it down to. There is no ifs or buts or maybe. He's a goal scorer. He's quick enough to take players on. He's quick enough to get in behind defences, whilst also confident enough and talented enough to dribble on the ball. But he also has it in him to just unleash an absolute leather of a shot that I think we'll be seeing a lot of good goals and a lot of highlight reels and what you would call a sports centre moment coming from Fernandez. But I'm just looking at some of the statements, some of the quotes from Giovanni Savarese, the Portland Timbers manager, about it, and he said, "While we view him as a forward with our immediate group, his versatility and ability to play in different positions and systems gives us further tactical flexibility and options." And obviously, he's seen more of him than I have, but from the brief period that I've seen him, he does have the ability. And whilst I do view him as a striker, as a centre forward, as a main attacking threat, with as the goal scorer, he also has the pace, the dribbling ability, and the attacking knowledge. You could probably put him out wide. You could probably put him as a central attacking midfielder or just off the striker, and I think he'll give them a massive boost. I think he'll give them a big boost because he seems to have the confidence and the ability, and he's been moved around. I thought it was his 5th country in 3 seasons or something along those lines, but that doesn't seem to bother me. I don't read that and think, ooh, red flag, maybe he doesn't settle in. On one hand, you could look at it like that. On one hand, you could look at it as that he's too busy looking for the next big move. He's too busy trying to get a step up, and he might be. That might be the case. But I also look at it and go, teams are willing to take him on their side, bring him in, and he also seems to be talented enough to deal with whatever pressure comes his way, and he seems talented enough to almost go into any situation unfazed, confident of his ability, and he goes out there and he does what he does best, and that's score goals. But also there does seem to be a red flag with his behaviour problems. When he was 20 in Argentina, he was tested positive for a banned substance and he was served a suspension during 2015. And he was sent off in his final game in Mexico and was handed a 3-match ban for spitting at a fan while leaving the field. You certainly hope that doesn't transfer over to MLS, because it is one thing to be this level of indiscipline in countries that are considered, perhaps rightly or wrongly, considered to be hot-headed, passionate. They let their emotions get the better of them at times, but certainly not in MLS. That doesn't seem to happen a lot in Major League Soccer. So you think that if he was to almost... you'd think that almost if he was to take this attitude and mentality and these actions over to MLS, he won't last long here in the league anyway. But you would imagine that in a calmer environment where things perhaps aren't as rowdy as they are in Mexico or Argentina, that, perhaps he'll calm down, perhaps he'll settle down, and he'll, around the influence of other Argentinians like Diego Valeri and Sebastian Blanco in the Timbers team, they can have a word with him and say, look, that kind of stuff, that doesn't fly here. That isn't what we do over in Major League Soccer. So maybe he calms down. Maybe the discipline's problems go away. Maybe he just focus entirely on his talent, on his soccer, and maybe in a few months' time we're looking at him and he's improving the talents of major teams in the times. Maybe he's improving an MLS Cup runner-up. That's the talent he kind of has. But I also think it's good business from the Timbers, because one thing I think it does show is that this isn't New York, this isn't Los Angeles, and this isn't a fashionable kind of Atlanta United team where people think it's cool to play for them or think it's cool to view them. This isn't the Galaxy. This isn't NYCFC or the Red Bulls. This isn't in soccer terms, it is a premium market. In MLS terms, it is a premium market. But in every other sporting landscape in the Americans, in the United States of America, it isn't a major market. And I think, regardless of whether you think it is or it isn't, for Portland to be able to attract a player with this reputation for this amount of money, to pry him away from Mexico and put him in their team straight away, or at least come June time he'll be there, I think it's important to know that that's the power that some MLS teams have. And I think the influence of the other Argentinians in the team, the manager as well, who might be able to get along with Fernandez, I think he wouldn't be able to go into any team. I think this is the perfect team for him, but it also says a lot about the pulling power of Portland, that they can come in with this kind of money, whether it be $10 million or the reported $13 million, in and around that price range, maybe even higher. I think it's important for them to keep playing the way they are, keep attracting players the way they are, because it is a big message to the rest of the league that you don't need to be a New York or a Los Angeles or a Atlanta United to be able to attract players from south of the border. I think it is important for them to keep making decisions like this, and I think it is massive for the league. I think it is massive for Portland that whilst they are, they're obviously a talented team, they're obviously very, very good, but I also feel like it is huge for them, it's huge for the league that they're able to attract these marquee players, because this isn't a scrub team in a scrub place. These are players that are excellent. You could argue that they'd get into any team in MLS. I know Diego Valeri probably would, and I'd be willing to bet my house on that every single team in MLS would take him, and he'd be a star for them. What's to say that Brian Fernandez won't be? There's a lot riding on this, and he's going to be a very important player. He's going to be a very exciting player for how Portland want to play. I think it's good. I think it's exciting. I think it's something that most people would look at and think, no, it's another South American joining the league. It's another good one. Let's add him to the rest of the collection. But this one, I don't know. It feels different. There's something about this where I look and go, he's got the potential to be an outstanding player, simultaneously being an explosive one, where he'll score a hat-trick, but he can also punch someone's lights out. And while I'm not an advocate of punching someone's lights out, for the entertainment value, for the drama value for it, and, the drama that comes with this sport, it's box office. Brian Fernandez could be box office. And I think it's important to remember that not every box office player has to go to certain markets. They can go to other teams. And I think his reported debut is going to be June 1st against LAFC. It's going to be the home opener for the Portland Timbers, where they've got the new stand and the new look park for them. I think it's going to be brilliant. I think that's going to be a game where people just have to tune in and watch it, because not only is it a new look for them, not only is it a debut for Brian Fernandez, it is a big moment, because it's got a player that's coming from Mexico, 3 Argentinians playing against a Mexican from LAFC, and it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be enjoyable. It's going to be a big moment. It's going to be a big moment, and if MLS had their heads screwed on, they'd be targeting this game as the game to promote across the world. It would work. It would be a brilliant way to bring the Portland Timbers new Providence Park look to the rest of the world. It'd be the best way to show how talented some of these players are, how good LAFC have been. Not to bring them into this conversation, but I think that would be a big part of it. But I also think the risk of the explosiveness of players like Fernandez is something that is must-watch television. It's must-watch Major League Soccer television, because it's not Cantona vibes completely, but you kind of get that idea of he can score one of the best goals you'll see all season and then produce a moment of madness coming off the pitch or off the pitch entirely that either damages his reputation or enhances it even further as something completely different, and enhances his reputation as something other than a soccer player, other than a goal scorer, other than a marquee signing for the Portland Timbers, and becomes someone that the league can market around, the same way that they should be doing with Carlos Vela, but in completely different ways. In the volatile nature of Fernandez, the potential volatile nature of Fernandez rather, is something that I think should be looked out for, is something that most people wouldn't acknowledge, or they try to hide. And whilst I'm not exactly condoning substance abuse, if it is performance enhancing, I don't really care. I think there's bigger problems in soccer and bigger problems in sport and bigger problems in American culture than whether someone's trying to get an upper hand in their sport. There's bigger fish to fry, and I think if we're all fretting about drug use, I just don't care. It's not, people are trying to get the upper hand. They're paid a lot of money. There's a lot of intense pressure on them. They're trying to get the upper hand. Cheers for that. They're trying to get the upper hand, And they're doing it the way they can. It isn't by the law, and they should be punished rightly. But I'm not going to get fretted about it. Fernandez, he's done his time. He served his suspension. He might have changed since then, and I quite frankly don't care about what happened to him in the past. Shouldn't spit at a fan? Of course he shouldn't. He shouldn't be doing this in MLS, and if he does this in his time in Portland, he's going to get called out. Rightly so, he's going to get called out, and he should get called out for it because it's a horrible thing to do. But on the pitch, he has the potential to be fantastic. On the pitch, he has the potential to change this Portland Timbers team from being aren't they lucky to be in the MLS Cup final against a very good team in Atlanta to these are legitimate challengers and nobody wants to face them. They have the potential to have what Atlanta have with their front three last season, and they have the ability to make it work. Blanco, Valeri, Fernandez. Remember those three names because they're not going to be just them three anymore. They're going to be the Timbers trio. They're going to be the triple threat for the Timbers, and it's going to strike fear in the rest of the league if Fernandez hits the ground running. And there is no better way to hit the ground running with a game against LAFC, a statement win in your new home or your new look home, and just to hammer home the point that you are an excellent player, you have a lot to prove, and you're willing to prove it, and you're going to put the rest of your indiscretions from the past behind you. This is a new start, and sure, the Timbers are probably preparing to get the best out of him for the next few years, or however long he's there. And if he does get thrown on elsewhere, like Almiron has, because he is young, he is only 24 years old. If he does get thrown on in the next year or two, then so be it. I think they're probably preparing for that, but they're going to have to try to get the best out of him whilst they can. And I think it starts with that game against LAFC when he's able to play. It's exciting to think about. It's an exciting prospect, and I think the big news is worthy news because it's not every day that Portland get a player that grabs the league attention. They have Valeri, but he probably wouldn't strike anybody as. I know he's been the MVP, but in the past few years, there's been other players that have taken the limelight off of him, and I think Fernandez has the opportunity to only increase the look of Portland across the league, and I think this is going to be something to keep an eye out on. I think it's going to be something incredible to watch. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be exciting to watch, and I think it is something you've got to keep your eye on. I think it's time now to look back at some of the games that have come this past weekend, and I think there's only one place to start. When it comes to reviewing what's happened in the past week, I'm not going to go over every game. I'm just going to go over games that I think matter the most and have the most talking points from them. And the first one has got to be Sporting Kansas City 0, Atlanta United 3. Because whilst it wasn't a vintage and classic Atlanta performance that we've used to see in the past two seasons, it did give us an insight into what I think might be the best way for them to go. It won't work against every team because Sporting KC came at them. They were very brave in their approach. They didn't sit off them. They took the game to Atlanta. They smelt blood to an extent. And I think Atlanta dealt with their pressure very well. And I think the pressure from KC played into the hands of Atlanta, who played very well on the counter-attack, something they've utilised in the past before. Their pace on the break was outstanding, and there is a special mention, of course, to Ezequiel Barco, who I have been critical of before. I haven't exactly felt that his $15 million price tag was worth it. Maybe that's because of his age. It was a bedding-in process. We all know there was rumours of him last season about indiscretions and distrust with him and his teammates. I think this might be the breakout part for him this season. Ironically enough, he puts in an outstanding performance against KC, a very good KC team. And then people start to think, maybe he's turned the corner. Maybe he's coming into this season and he's looking very good. And then he goes away on international duty and they're missing him for a good couple of games. But I also think that the replacement that Atlanta have for him in Tito Villalba, he's just as good. And he's a very good player. Joseph Martinez scored twice. His second goal, the third goal, was particularly, I thought, a very good finish. His first goal was, good poacher's play because Barco's shot was parried by Malia in the KC goal, and Martinez was there to pounce on it and capitalise. He injured himself in the process. He was able to carry on, but I think the counter-attacking style kind of suited Atlanta United, and I think in a way that is one of the reasons why they've underperformed a little bit this season. The ball will get Frank de Boer will get criticised for how he set his side up to play. Yes, they've not been as good as Tata Martino's side. Hardly anybody is. But he is a possession-based game. And when you think about what's happened with Atlanta United so far this season, they've come up against teams who are willing to sit back. They're willing to soak up the pressure because they know they're not going to be able to outplay the players they've got there. They're not going to be able to outplay Atlanta. And they look to do an Atlanta to soak up the pressure and hit them on the counter-attack. And what Atlanta have tried to do is pass the ball. They tried to keep possession a bit more because they know they're going to have the majority of the ball, and their counter-attacking style will only work in games like this past weekend, where they faced Sporting KC, who were brave enough to take them on, and that bravery cost them. I think that's the big thing that people have got to look at, is that Atlanta are a very good team when they're on the counter-attack. It's winning possession, they've got to find a way to win. But this past weekend, their win against Sporting KC, I think it gave us a view of what could happen if teams are brave enough to take on Atlanta. But it also shows us what Atlanta can do when teams are brave enough to take them on. And it's a catch-22 for some of the opponents, and I think it is a bit of a dangerous situation, because if you capitalise on the bad form that Atlanta have been on in recent times, it's certainly the start of this season, where you take the game to them and you press them, they will take you down, because they are quicker than most teams, they are capable of playing on the counter-attack better than most teams, and they've got one of the best strikers in the league. Arguably the best striker this league's seen. Certainly, statistically, he's up there in the conversation in Joseph Martinez. But it is a case of whether or not it carries on in this form. They're coming up against, next week, a Toronto side that I think will be able to soak up the pressure, but will also be able to hit them on the counter-attack because they're so quick and they're so wide. So I think that game will pose a bigger threat because you just never know what's going to happen. You don't know whether Toronto, with Pozuelo, who's turning into one of my favourite players to watch. He's turning into must-watch Major League Soccer television. And I don't know whether he's going to be able to run the game against Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz in the way that people want him to and people expect him to. But I also think it is a massive test for Atlanta, because do you allow Toronto to press on you and risk what Pozuelo can do and what the rest of Toronto can do to you? Or do you try to soak up the pressure? On one hand, do you soak up the pressure, risk what Pozuelo can do to you, and then hit them on the counter-attack like you've done before, certainly against KC? Or do you try to take the game by the scruff of the neck, control it yourselves, pass it around, and force Toronto to sit back, but also run the risk of having Toronto counter on you? It's a catch-22 situation for other teams when they play against Atlanta like this, but in games like this, it is a catch-22 for Atlanta as well, because their game plan is going to be dependent on what Toronto do. If Toronto are sitting back, then Atlanta aren't going to sit back because the ball is there for them to be had. If Atlanta sit back and Toronto take the game to them, you're running risk for one of the deadliest attacking midfielders in the league at the moment running riot and taking control of the game. It's just a case of feeling out the process. The first 5 or 10 minutes will be huge in this particular game, and I think if Atlanta can get through that and get the course of play in the direction they want it to, then I think they'll be in with a win. I think they'll win this one. But then if Toronto are able to dictate the play and dictate the style of the game that they want it to be, then you have no idea what's going to happen. I think that makes it even more interesting to see, because it opens up a whole new conundrum. Atlanta United probably never had this problem in the past 2 seasons, and they're probably going to want to exact revenge on what happened on the last day of last season on Decision Day when Toronto beat them to prevent Atlanta from winning the Supporters' Shield. Obviously, it didn't really matter in the end because MLS Cup went to Atlanta. But I think the fans will want to win. I think the players will want to win. I think De Boer knows that this will be a big scalp for him and it will be important for him to get this win under his belt. But I also think it will be a big one on the same token for Toronto. I think if they can get a win at the Benz against the Atlanta side that looked confident, that looked in their element against Sporting Kansas City, then it'll be a big notch for them. But we just don't know what's going to happen, and I think it'll be even more fun to find out what happens, to look at what happens, and I think you just never know. I think this is precisely what MLS does to you. It throws you up games where you don't know what's going to happen. And by the way, it isn't exactly live soon on it's not live soon on Sky Sports because Sky Sports don't have it on Wednesday morning slash Thursday on Wednesday evening slash Thursday morning because this is the schedule for MLS on Thursday the 9th of May. It is Atlanta versus Toronto at 12 a.m. Columbus Crew versus LA Galaxy at half 12 a.m. Two teams that we'll get onto in a minute. Chicago Fire at home to the New England Revolution 1 a.m. and the Red Bulls versus Montreal Impact at 1 a.m. And then you got the games on Saturday, which is Saturday morning going into Saturday evening, which is Vancouver versus Portland at 3 a.m. Seattle. Cincinnati are at home to Montreal Impact at 6 p.m. FC Dallas are at home to New York Red Bulls. Toronto, following this Atlanta game, will be at home to Philadelphia. And then at 9 p.m. on Sky Sports Football, it is Los Angeles FC versus New York City FC. And then at 9 p.m. on Sky Sports Football, it will be Los Angeles Galaxy, Zlatan Ibrahimovic and the Galaxy hosting New York City. I think that will be one of the games to watch, and I think you'll be stupid to miss that. And speaking of the Galaxy, they have just come off the back of a loss against the New York Red Bulls. A lot was made of the fact that it was Zlatan Ibrahimovic's first time against one of the New York teams. It's his first trip to New York, despite the fact that the New York Red Bulls don't actually play in New York. They play in New Jersey. They play in Harrison, New Jersey, so it wasn't his first time in New York. It was his first time in New Jersey. Just wanted to get that off the chest because it annoyed me when they were talking about it in the commentary and the build-up, just to get some extra clicks. Don't get me wrong, don't let the facts get in the way of the story. I understand that. Perhaps, if they'd have promoted it as his first time in New Jersey, they might have won the game. Because there was something about the Galaxy this past weekend that, while up for going forward, I thought they were very impressive. I thought they were very clinical, especially Zlatan with his assist and his goal. I thought he was impressive. I thought the way that the rest of the team played was impressive. But defensively, there is still something missing about this Galaxy team. It just felt a bit too easy for the Red Bulls to carve open the Galaxy. I thought it was a bit too easy for them to open up. A bit too easy for them to open up and carve open the Galaxy defence. And there was a couple of times where they were just left on the edge of the box, wide open. And it was something I think the Galaxy have to look into. I think they need to reinforce their defence as soon as possible. And it doesn't even need to be a big name defender. It just needs to be better defenders. The Red Bulls, they looked impressive. They looked better than they have done for most times I've seen them this season. If they can carry this on into another game and another run, then hopefully Thierry Henry doesn't turn up anytime soon, and Chris Armas keeps his job, because I like Chris Armas. I like the job he did last season. I hope he keeps it on this season. But I think that this was a big statement victory for them. This was an important game for them to stake their claim, to assert their dominance in a certain effect, because the Galaxy were there, the attention was on the Galaxy, attention was on Zlatan for his first time in New York City, in a different state across the river. But let's not get the facts in the way of the good story, of course, because, facts are important, but not too important when you've got to make money. What Zlatan did, he had a big effect on the game. It wasn't big enough because the Red Bulls just carved open the Galaxy defence, and I can't express it even more than I already have. I was watching the game live at the same time that Liverpool were playing Newcastle. I was watching the Red Bull versus the Galaxy. Thanks Sky Sports for only putting the second half on. I thought the Red Bulls, they were impressive. I liked the way they played, and they exploited the Galaxy's weaknesses very well. But the Galaxy need to improve if they have any hopes of, winning MLS Cup. They'll reach the playoffs because it was only their second loss all season. They will reach the playoffs because they have the talisman up front in Zlatan Ibrahimovic. His goals will probably, and not to discredit anybody else on the team, but it's just the nature of how it is in that team. The gravitas is Ibrahimovic. His goals will put them into the playoffs because they certainly can't defend their way into playoffs. If they improve their defence before the transfer deadline day shuts, then they've got a serious contender on their hands. Will they? I doubt it. Will Zlatan drag them into the playoffs? Almost certainly. Will he make them contenders? You need more than a big Swedish striker who scores a lot of goals to win MLS Cup. Atlanta are an all-round team. Toronto the year previous were an all-round team, and Seattle the year before were built on that. Certainly in the MLS Cup final match, were built around defence. If the Galaxy are to get anywhere, it is down to Ibrahimovic, but their defence does need sorting out. Speaking of defences that needed sorting out, I'm only going to spend a couple of seconds on this because the New England Revolution, you are trash. Lost 6-1 away from home against the Philadelphia Union. All credit to the Union. They are a bit of an underdog team. They're a bit underappreciated. They fly under the radar a little bit. But when you put 6 goals past anybody, you have to get the attention you deserve. The Revs, Brad Friedel, I like him. He seems like a nice guy. Is he ready for management? I don't know. I'm not one to judge that, although my Football Manager CV tells me otherwise. This Revs team are an embarrassment. There is no hope for them. If there was promotion and relegation, they'd be down already. The only hope they've got for them is they can rebuild. And as much as Robert Kraft is a good NFL owner with the New England Patriots, he's given the Revolution a home, even though no one turns up to it and no one really seems to care about them. He was one of the founding investors into Major League Soccer. They need a new owner. They need a new stadium. They need a new owner, and they need a bit of impetus. And quite frankly, they need to give people a reason to care. Because when people care, everything seems to get better. The atmosphere at Sporting KC Atlanta was superb. The atmosphere at New York Red Bulls versus the Galaxy was superb. Impact versus NYCFC was superb. Union Revs, it's 6-1. The Revs are trash. They're just not very good. The only way is up. But the fans need a reason to care. They need better players. They need better ownership. There just needs to be better all round. And Impact versus NYCFC that I touched on briefly there, the atmosphere seemed quite good there. It was a nice sunny day. The kits kind of clashed, but it wasn't too bad because you had a bit of black and light blue kicking about. But one thing I wanted to touch upon was the absolute state of that Impact pitch. I mean, if there's one team to have a bad pitch against, it's the NYCFC. It's New York City FC, simply because that they're used to playing on bad pitches themselves. But at least they have the excuse of it being a baseball ground. The Yankees play the pitch for the NYCFC looks awful. Impact, they just seem to have forgotten it was there. They just seem to have forgotten it was there, and it looked awful on television, and I'm sure it looked awful in real life, live at the game, and I'm sure it was terrible to play on. But that being said, the advantage for the bad pitch seemingly did go to NYCFC because I thought they were quite impressive. I thought they played the best way they've played in quite some time. I didn't watch the game live. I caught extended highlights of it online, and from what I saw of it, they were impressive. From what I saw of it, they were quite clinical. Maxi Morales after 5 minutes and Ismail Tajuri, his goal was superb. Any goal that is curled into the top corner, especially the opposite corner, I'm here for. I'm here all day for them kind of goals, and this was right up my alley. It was superb to watch, and the noise and the power he got into it. It was brilliant to watch, and I was happy for the NYCFC to finally do well because I feel like there seems to be a lot of distractions at that team at the moment. There seems to be a lot of distractions with the lack of huge star player, the lack of stadium. I like the Yankees. I'm a Yankees fan. I'm all for Yankee Stadium when it comes to concerts, when it comes to baseball, when it comes to soccer, not particularly. The problem that NYCFC have is there's only a handful of places that you can build a stadium on. There's nowhere in Manhattan you can build a stadium on. Queens, maybe. Brooklyn, maybe. Bronx, you're in it. Staten Island, plenty of room there, but the travel there is atrocious and it'll be horrible for fans to get to and from, because the ferry only comes half an hour, and whilst it is free, and I would recommend anybody that hasn't used it to go and use it because it is a wonderful service, and Staten Island is a wonderful place. I've visited it. It is a place that you look at and kind of go, if I ever make it in life, I want to move here. And I think the NYCFC team should be looking at Staten Island and thinking, if we want to make it in MLS, we should be moving here too. But the only problem is the transport for the fans. I don't think it would be a bad idea, but for the time being, they're in the Yankees' backyard, and the lack of a decent pitch seemed to actually serve them well this weekend against the Impact. I thought they played quite well. I thought it was the first time where you looked at NYCFC this season and thought, you've got something going here. You've got something ahead where you can build upon. This is the first time since Villa left and since Dome came in where I felt confident that they've got a good team there. I think it's taken a while for everything to click. It's taken a while for everything to fit into one another. But as is the case with many projects, it did take a while, and it has taken a while, but it does seem to be pointing in the right direction. It was a good win against a good Impact team, especially in a good atmosphere. So you can only hope that NYCFC take this win, move it forward, and kind of do something with it, because New York needs a good team. It needs a team that wins. You know, my Knicks are good. They're good at losing. That's what they're good at. They're good at drumming interest and rumours around the league of who they're going to sign in free agency and who they're going to get in the draft lottery. You know, tank for Zion, here we go. But they're not winners. The Jets, the Giants, the Mets, they're not winners. The Yankees, they're winners. I mean, they haven't won anything, but they're playing like winners. NYCFC, if they can capitalise on this, and I think they need to take a leaf out of Portland's they need to take a leaf out of Portland's book here and kind of get a star player in to ignite the team and kind of go, they need a replacement from Villa, not just in terms of on the pitch and his leadership, but from terms of galvanising people. People would go to NYCFC and they would pay attention to NYCFC for two reasons. One, the first two initials, New York, and the second reason being David Villa was there. And before that, it was Andrea Pirlo and with Frank Lampard, and then it was Jack Harrison, and there was recognisable players. Whereas now, it is a case of NYCFC, isn't that Villa's team? Oh, he's not there anymore. Oh, who plays here? Oh, I don't know who that is. You know, it doesn't... Of course, they're playing well without the big name team, but they would get a lot more attention, and they'd probably be a lot more fearful. They'd strike a lot more fear into the opposition teams if they had a big name player the same way the Galaxy do. The Galaxy, as an overall team, probably aren't that good. Let's just be honest, they're probably not that good. But what have they got over NYCFC? They've got that talisman. They've got the target. They've got the big man. They've got the one player that everybody recognises, and they've got the one player that everybody doesn't want to play against because they know how good he can be. Now imagine that kind of presence, that kind of talent, and that kind of fear when NYCFC roll up. That's what they need to do, and that is to an extent what they had with David Villa. But, you know, only time will tell. And if Dome and the NYCFC crew want to go one way and the City Football Group don't want to pay attention to him anymore, I understand that. I just feel it was a massive waste. But this win here, it gave you a glimpse of how good they can be. And it gave you a glimpse of what can happen when everybody's on the same page and everything gets working together. Moving on to the next game that I want to talk about, and it's DC United versus the Columbus Crew. Anybody that knows me that knows that I have a strong feeling in my heart towards the Crew because of everything that happened with them in their move or their potential move and everything they did to stop that. If you follow me on @_TomSkulls online, you'll be able to know that I've done a lot of work on the Crew. I've spoken to the Crew. They're a big part of my book, Stateside Soccer, The Definitive History of Soccer in the United States, which, by the way, here comes the plug, is available to pre-order now on Amazon UK and US, and it is available to buy in the United Kingdom July 29th and October 2nd in the United States. I'm my own advertisement for this podcast. If anybody does want to advertise me, by all means, contact me. I'm more than happy to take money for this. I'm sitting at a desk, talking to my laptop, enjoying myself. It's fine. If you want to advertise on here, that's fine. I'll advertise myself on here for the time being. But for the Crew and DC United, someone needs to have a look at the referee, Ted Ungle. He got in the way for the first Crew goal, and I felt like it was ruled off for VAR, so it doesn't actually count as the first Crew goal, but it should have been the first Crew goal because he got in the way and it wasn't a foul on anybody. I don't really know what had happened. If he thought he was in the way to begin with, he should have blown up, but he didn't. He let the play go on. He then ruled it out. It shouldn't have stood. The Crew should feel hard done by for this game, because whilst DC United won 3-1, the scoreline and the performance from DC probably didn't match up with each other. It was a penalty for Rooney that that was given, that it did come off Will Trapp's hand. It was a handball, but I think the Crew can feel hard done by with this one because they didn't play poorly. They should have been 1-0 up, but for one reason, the man called Uncle decided to chalk it off because of an error. Maybe it was the Zardes tackle that he didn't spot initially. Maybe it's the fact he got in the way of the play and he found Acosta. I don't know. He didn't give it. It wasn't. It was a disgrace, to be perfectly honest, because there was no clarity in that situation. And as much as I am an advocate for VAR, that is the problem with it. That is the problem with VAR, because there's a decision there that is very unclear. It cost the Crew a goal. Caleb Porter, the Crew manager, obviously wasn't very happy when it was chalked out, and I understand why. And the clarity does need to be put out there. He does need to come out and say, right, this is why it was there. This is why I've chalked it off. Boom. End of story. The Crew got their only goal because Bill Hamid couldn't catch the ball. It was like he had butter on his gloves and it slipped through his hands, through the corner, and it went in. DC United are still rolling on. They're still looking very impressive. Again, it's another factor of they've got a player and a talisman up front that people don't want to play against. That when he has a set piece, when he has a free kick, and when he gets on the ball, people have the feeling that Wayne Rooney's going to do something. They also get the feeling that Luciano Acosta's going to do something, which is why PSG and apparently Man United wanted to sign him in the January transfer window. But I also think that is what the talisman can do for you. That is how good someone like that can be. They can strike fear into the other team. Whilst the Crew didn't seem scared or put off in the initial stages, they had the hope beaten out of them by poor officiating. But that's one thing, and that's one thing for another. I think DC United are impressive. I think the Crew are impressive as well. I think they've got good pieces that can make a good playoff team. Sometimes they just need the luck to go their way. And if I would have one major nitpick with the team of the Crew, if they had there seems to be an abundance of goal scorers that need to be put into MLS teams, but the Crew, if they had a goal scorer, would be superb. I like Yazi Zardes. I like his pace. I like his energy. I like his movement. I do think he is a dangerous player, but he's got a bit of Danny Welbeck about him. Whereas he's got all the tools to be superb, but he just isn't. He just can't piece it together. And I think that seems to be the story of the Crew this season, where they've got all the pieces, they just can't put it together. And I think that is the story of this game. I think that's the story of the Crew and the story of the Zardes. I think that is it for this episode of MLS Talks. Thank you for joining me for the second episode of MLS Talks. I've been Tom Scholes. I've been talking into my laptop. I've been promoting myself on my own podcast, or own whatever you want to call this. As I mentioned halfway through, I'll just say it a little bit louder, just in case anybody didn't hear it the first time round. My book, Stateside Soccer, The Definitive History of Soccer in the United States, is out to pre-order now on Amazon UK, Amazon US, Barnes & Noble, WH Smith's, Waterstones as well, all online. All the links to those pre-orders will be in the description. You'll be able to find this on my social medias at @Tom Scholes. That's on Twitter. That's on Instagram as well. The book comes out July 29th here in the United Kingdom, and in the United States of America, it comes out October 2nd. I may or may not be coming over to the United States in October. That is still yet to be confirmed, but if anybody does want to promote me on their podcast or anything like that, I am more than happy to come over. And I always whisper about it because I hate putting myself out like this. But apart from that, I do think it is it. I think this is it. I think it's been fun looking at the games, watching the highlights, analysing them, looking at the Timbers signing Brian Fernandez, the volatile, drug-taking, spitting at fan striker that might take the league by storm. Or, coincidentally, he might kick a fan in the face whilst injecting himself with whatever he's allegedly done before. I think that's the fun part of MLS, because you just never know what's going to happen next. I've been Tom Scholes. Thank you for listening to MLS Talks. This has been episode 2. Come back next week for episode 3, where hopefully we've got a lot to talk about, with LA Galaxy hosting New York City FC live from 9 PM on Sky Sports Football this weekend. Thank you very much.